Namaste and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, logos means a study or science, Sattology means a study or science of truth. And whereas the opposite of that is mythology, myth means a fake lie, imagination. It's a Sanskrit root word, just like in English you have root words, like GE is the source of George, which means a person of the land. So similarly, Sanskrit root word myth means a fake lie, imagination. Mythology means a study of fake or science of fake lie or imagination. This word mythology was coined against the Indian culture Vedic system because the West could not counteract it, and they were far less sophisticated than the Vedic culture, and that's why it was coined. So in this show, we always try to bring you a very truthful narrative, which is different than what you have heard. And today we have a very famous author of RSS 360 and many three other books on Rashtriya Sevak Sangh, which is one of the social volunteer organizations in India, despite what the world speaks about and the media talks about. But it is a social organization. It's the world's largest social organization. So, and we have very preeminent person who has done a PhD on that organization. And also we have a person who he's very famous on the Indian TV shows and also gives opinion on many matters, international as well as Indian. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Ratan Sharda.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Namaskar. So again, we are back here and discussing something after a long time, though. This time we had a bigger break.
Yeah.
So
last time we had to give it up because of a poor network. Now it's fine.
Ratanji, a lot of things are changing right now in the whole world, and it's very fast moving world. And again, with the new administration, and without being political, but just for educating people who are on the political science subjects. Again, what is the Indian view of the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Well, see, Aditya ji, if you look at India's stand for long, India has appreciated Israel always, has always helped Jews. It was the first country to offer asylum to Jews who came to India after being persecuted. So this affection for Jews comes from that old times, thousands of years back. And earlier, the relations were covert in the time of Congress because Congress government felt that we need to always keep the Islamic world happy because of probably oil issue or whatever they thought. And maybe the supposedly secular ethos, which India meant that you have to always sound and believe in pro-Muslim stand. But as the governments changed, slowly it became overt and slowly became very open. And Israel has always helped India. India always has a soft corner for Israel. And to tell you a very interesting nugget, the first pro-Israel book was written by an RSS senior leader, Mr. Palkar, who was the first generation Pracharak. And he wrote a book from Chhada Kadu Bada Kade, which means from persecution to a strong nation. So the first book on Israel India was written by an RSS person, and it was very pro and very appreciative of what Israel had achieved. And there is also very close relation with Israeli Jewish community in India. Even those people who go back to Israel, they still love their land of choice where they had got asylum, so they still love India. So it's actually a very old and very affectionate relation that we have. In terms of politics, in terms of international diplomacy, as I said, from hidden relations, they became very overt. And for the first time, Mr. Modi went to Palestine separately, and he went separately to Israel. Otherwise, there always had to be a counterbalance. If you talked of Israel, you must talk of Palestine, you must talk about Lebanon, etc. But for the first time, Modi ji broke that equivalence and visited Israel independently. Despite this, Modi ji had best relations with Arabic countries. So it shows that it's possible to keep a balance. It's possible to have relations with both the countries. And I think real in terms of American support also for the first time, Mr. Trump broke a big deadlock in the Middle East countries by creating new relations of UAE and Saudi Arabia, etc. with Israel, which was never imagined. Just the way Camp David had Egypt and Jordan slowly coming towards Israel and making peace. So recognition of Israel as a reality is the first step towards having a peaceful coexistence, which is even now missing. In short, that is what I believe. And whether India speaks for Israel openly or not, the closeness and the complete support to Israel is always taken for granted as far as we are concerned, and Israel also the same way. So diplomatic silence or diplomatic, talk is different, but this the assertion of this friendship was done by Mr. Modi, and it has been highly appreciated. Even now, Reliance, the biggest company in India, has tied up with Israel for identification of COVID virus in a very wonderful way based on breath analysis. So that is how close we are. Many Indians are working there in Israel. Israel has close cooperation with many of the Indian companies, especially in agriculture, science, and IT. So it's a great relationship.
The Israel, as a small country, has been uh, the most innovative country in the world. It, despite being the small
Yes.
size, they filed 22,000 patents in
Oh, yes.
2018.
Oh, yes.
And 2019 data I do not have, but
In fact, I'm sure that if the Arabic countries who have not tied up with Israel or rather given their hostility, now I hope this current conflict doesn't create a problem with these relations. They will also be looking at Israel for their support towards water conservation, towards farming, and all those things, because uh, the oil producing Islamic nations will face the problem of oil getting over in soon. So they need alternatives, and that Israel is the best example. And if you look at Israel, when you visit Jordan and you see Israel on the other side, or when you see Israel vis-a-vis Arabic Syria, you find that huge contrast between the greenery of Israel and the barrenness of the other side. So that is how important Israel is for progress of the Arabic world also.
you mentioned some very important points in the science and technology area. But like, if you look at geographically, there are two successful countries in the entire region in the West Asia. One is Israel, and the second is India. The rest, all the countries in the middle are struggling, or something or the other problem, and which also speaks. And both are multicultural countries, and both are multicultural democracies also. And
There is huge difference in the sense the sheer size of India and its population vis-a-vis the size of Israel and its population. But yes, both have faced hostilities since their birth. India was attacked in Kashmir by Pakistan as soon as India they became independent. Within 2 3 months, Israel was attacked the very day it came out as a country or recognized as a country. So the hostilities of the neighbor is the common feature of both the countries. And of course, now India has also learned a lot from the aggression of Israel, I would say, not directly or indirectly. And it also has now taken up the task of disciplining the neighbors, not just taking it lying and running to UN or US every time.
no, we have a lot of Palestinian friends on this show also, and I must also say that India has helped Palestine in the biggest way. In fact,
Hugely, huge.
one of the biggest
The
aid
only
provided.
problem was the kind of asymmetry we had. Is Palestine has always remained close, governments have helped successively. It is an asymmetry between relations of Palestinians and Israel, which was the conflicting nature of India's diplomatic, relations with the both sides, and that has been removed now. Even today, India has been supporting Palestine. In fact, though not liked by many, India did stand with Israel in the last UN resolution because we believe there is some truth on the other side also. But yes, you cannot continuously claim that Israel has no right to exist. That is where the problem begins when you simply refuse that Israel as a country has a right to exist, Jews have a right to their own land. That is where the problem starts because the entire false narrative and the kind of, uh, unrealistic narrative that was created since 1948 that Israel has no right to exist. That is where the problem lies. That is where the seeds of conflict lie.
In international diplomatic circles, the in the international diplomatic circles, the Israeli cause has been has been very powerful in a way because of their economic progress and other progress, whereas Palestine, the people, generally people say, So India, I was looking at the aid which India has given. So first of all, the planes, the government planes which Palestine used to fly on, Palestinian officials, was donated by Indira Gandhi. And Indira Gandhi donated a plane to Yasser Arafat, and also India
Yeah,
rewarded him with a
Yasser Arafat was supposed to be a very good friend of India, and India was supposed to be a very good friend of Yasser Arafat. See, why Palestine has not progressed? Why the Muslim countries that are on the verge of conflict always, whether due to USA interference or on their own, is because they're always in the state of war. If Palestinians were not encouraged by their neighboring Arabic countries to keep fighting with Israel and be always in conflict, Palestine would have had a wonderful life. There is no reason why they could not progress, except that they have been instigated continuously by the people who have actually have no interest. Because Israel, the Egyptian made peace, Jordan made peace, Syria made peace. Now other countries are making peace. Why Palestinian people are made as a fodder? That is the reason why Palestinians have not been able to progress very clearly. And it must be said, though not liked by many, that unless they come to agreement that they have to coexist with the Jews and Israel, they will have this problem for many more coming years.
you know, earlier, Palestine issue was supported by Israel, Jordan, and Syria, and Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. And they had almost 4 or 5 wars, and
Yes, six
Egypt
wars.
6 wars. But
Yes, plus two intifadas.
yes, and the ultimately all of them are militarily defeated. But now Turkey has stepped in and claiming to be the original heir to the Ottoman Empire. Now, very few Indians may know that it was the Indian soldiers in Jerusalem which defeated the Ottoman Empire. And that's why there was a Khilafat movement and all those movements were just
Famous War of Haifa.
famous
That's
war
where
of
India held the fort. Yes.
yeah. And
In fact, there is a memorial of Haifa in Israel.
that's right. And so the Indian contribution is there very much. And since Turkey is interfering in India's affairs regularly nowadays, so do you think that India has an obligation to Israel to protect, or to move, or make at least a statement for Turkey?
As I said, making statement doesn't really change the internal dynamics of relations with Israel. As far as Turkey is concerned, from being a very secular and very good Western-oriented country and very progressive country, it is slowly degenerating in Islamic state. And daydreaming of being the Khalifa of the world, Muslim world, is what has pushed Erdogan into this kind of activism. And now, since Saudi Arabia has tried to make peace with the world and with the non-Islamic world, including reforming its own society, Turkey has stepped in. They feel that there is a vacuum where they can fill in, but they are not as strong militarily or economically the way they are interfering the world order. It is, I think, the backing of other countries make them do it. But ultimately, the genes of Islamic Brotherhood, which saw instability in a big way in Egypt and in Syria, etc., will also see to it that Israel, the Turkish government doesn't remain anymore supposedly modern, progressive, secular state. And Muslim Brotherhood genes that are there in the Erdogan blood and their party will see to it that Turkey also will slowly descend into kind of chaos that other Middle East countries have been to, and that is the care they should take. It is in their own good that they will try to become caliphate of the world, but rather stay where they are as a wonderful country, as a beautiful country, and beautiful, very old civilization. So when they try to throw off that old civilizational strength, they might descend into kind of chaos that other countries have faced.
So in the past, if you look at the UN resolutions and the international diplomacy, British, French, and Americans have a lot of political stake in the Middle East, in this area especially. And this conflict has been politically kept alive over the years, despite Israel emerging as a key state and an important harbinger of peace, I would say. That's the only oasis of economic prosperity in that entire region. And India has always played a neutral role, and because of the distance. But in the name of Palestinian conflict, there has been attempts in the American academic circles, because everything in the US Congress or legislature first starts in the academics. In the academic circles, the Palestinian issue has been equated with Kashmir most of the times. So now, what is that comparison? How good is that comparison, or what is that comparison even correct?
See, you talked in terms of while before the discussion, you said that India, people should know India also talks about other issues in the world. But I would rather joke that US is highly self-centered country. It does not have any views apart from itself, and everything else it depends on the situation. It's a highly transactional country, and the current left orientation of the leftist academia is already there, but the current orientation of the politics also towards left is what is creating this spatial space for Palestinians. Yes, Palestinians have an issue, but how then you compare with the Palestinians with the Kashmir? First of all, Palestinians as Jews were living together. Jews were exiled, and after thousands of years they came back to their land, and they had to share as good neighbors, as good from family from the same origins. In Kashmir, it was a Hindu country. It was a Hindu state continuously since last 5,000 years, and during last few hundred years was it turned into a Muslim majority state. So the Hindus who were there were the original inhabitants. The Muslims there are also the same Hindus with the same root, but converted. And those converted people threw out the Hindus from their land. So where is the comparison? That was highly exclusivist approach of converted Muslims instigated by Pakistan, etc. That saw to the exodus of Kashmiri Hindus. While in case of Palestine, it's not that way. It is that their old brothers came back, whether they liked or not, and they would have liked, they would have settled it. But for the continuous instigation of the Arabic world, for whom Jews were anathema and they had to be finished off and they had no right to exist, that is how the things have changed. So those who claim to be Hitler, the Hitler as the the one who persecuted the Jews and created the Holocaust, Arabic world is no less. While in case of Kashmir, it is the Hindus, the original inhabitants who have been thrown out of the land, and they are trying to assert their rights. So there is no comparison. Of comparison, it is on the other side, the reverse sides, that I can say. Hindus want to come back to the land just like Jews wanted to come back to their lands.
There is a I deal with a lot of people, my friends in both the communities here in here, and the general talk amongst
See,
them.
you ask any academic whether any academic knows the roots of Kashmir civilization. Just ask them one single question. I'm sure they don't know anything beyond Kashmir, the Muslim majority Kashmir. They have no clue at all to the lofty civilization that Kashmir was, the great scholars it had, the Hindu knowledge system which flowed from Kashmir and went right up to Kanyakumari. So these Hindu roots are not even known. Nobody tries to find out. And that is the tragedy of this academia, which only I cannot imagine academia working on your impressions. How can you? As an academic, you must research deeply, and this knowledge is available about the ancient past of Kashmir. If they start the history sometime in when Kashmir became from Sheikh Abdullah's time, and just it's like China for Pakistan, they believe that world existed only from the Qasim Muhammad bin Qasim, who attacked Sindh and was the first person who actually entered India. After which for 500 years they dare not enter India. So this false hope that your life begins with Muhammad bin Qasim is similar to Western view or the so-called academic view, which believes that a life in Kashmir starts from Sheikh Abdullah. Totally false equivalence, totally refusal to look at the mirror, look at the glass, and see the real history. That is not how academics should behave.
Now, in during the time of Jawaharlal Nehru,
You
there
know
was,
how many people in your audience know that Lalitaditya of Kashmir was one of the biggest kingdoms right from Caspian Sea to Assam.
that's
I
right.
can bet not even 1% would know. So
That's
you can't blame because they don't even know. And then they try to equate the two. It's shameful.
Yeah. Read my first book, of the audience who are there. Read my first book, Debunking Mythology. I have put the timelines along with the dates for Lalita Aditya 1 and 2 both.
Yeah.
Now coming to the this point which you
Greatest
mentioned.
grammarian Panini
Yeah, that's right.
and all those great rishis, the writers of Natya Shastra, etc., all come from Kashmir.
Mahabharat was spoken in Jiljit,
Yes.
Pakistan.
Yes.
and that was the
They
first.
have more closeness, that language, Gilgit Baltistan, etc., have more closeness to Indian languages than the imposed Arabic script and Urdu. There's
That,
no connection with people.
that's right. And see, what we have seen is when people are displaced from their roots, then there is no development in those lands. Like you look at any country which has been displaced, like any of the Middle Eastern countries which have been imposed by a religious view of a Arabic view, there is those all those countries are failed countries, all those.
No, but see, I would say problem comes from the Western worldview that others don't have a right to their own property, their own assets. Whether it's African countries, whether it's Saudi or Arabian countries, what right the Western world had to divide the countries with straight lines and deciding what will go to whom, and what right did they have to commit atrocities and wars, to impose war on those countries which didn't go the way they wanted them to go. So this urge to interfere just to keep their assets free, as safe, is the worst part of imperialism that has not gone out of their minds. Even today, Africa has been exploited in the worst possible manner, and they don't give a damn if Nigeria dies because Boko Haram doesn't want girls to educate and kills them. None of them speaks up. None of them spoke when 50 or 60 girls were killed in Afghanistan because they're trying to get educated. Same with Boko Haram. So this very partial of the world in only terms of their economic gains is the major cause of conflict in Arab worlds and also in Africa, of the poverty that they have, because all the richness is extracted away by the imperialist. I would not use this outdated word, but for the way they have behaved with Africa.
So I'll bring a little bit different one issue here, Yazidi, because Yazidis are a small minority in the Iraqi Kurdish
Yes.
area and Iraqi state, and they are the non-Muslims, and they've been resisting conversion for thousands of years, not just hundreds of years. And that plight has been largely ignored even by India and rest of the world. And
Yes.
they've been asking for justice, and that community is for the first time being supported by Israel. It's the first small country who is supporting it. Now, do you think that when we talk about Palestinian rights, then the world should also talk about Yazdi rights also?
Well, if you talk of rights, they have to talk rights of every minority, whether it's Uyghurs, whether it's any other community which has been persecuted, whether they're persecuted across anywhere in the world. Why they're not spoken about? You talked about Yazidis, you can talk about Uyghurs also, and you can talk about all other places where they've been harassed. I talked about Nigeria. You look at Southeast Asia. So everywhere there is a persecution of minorities. We speak very selectively. That is our problem.
So the British, and it is very ironic, Henry McMahon, who built the line for the division of line between Tibet and China,
Yes.
and the northeast of India, and also he is the one who built the maps of all the Middle Eastern countries on a paper. So therefore, the lines are straight lines, whichever he could. And
That is why it's very sad. It's like a dagger drawn. You are putting the dagger into the hand just because you feel the maps are coming just the way you pull your fingers. That is the biggest tragedy of Arabic world as well as India and China. They have created permanent conflicts. So as if it was, deliberate creation of permanent conflicts by drawing those lines.
absolutely, I think this is one of the major reasons. Now, coming back to the British imposition of these lines without considering the individual local aspirations, or so throughout the history, there was no boundaries between Syria, Levant, and which is Lebanon now, and Jordan, and Palestine, and Egypt. There were no lines over there anywhere. And
Mm.
even the Iraq and Iran were one country, according to even Mahabharata also, the same country.
Mhm.
It's called Persia for all of us, Parsi.
Yeah.
Now, the fallacy of those lines have been colonial fights, French and British, and German to some extent during World War II, but not so much German. So those
And in,
lines,
in, in African countries, many lines are drawn by Dutch also. So the way they have left Africa, they have left them in permanent conflict.
Now, in this case of Middle East and Israeli-Palestinian conflict, some of the lines which are very blurring, because more than 100,000 Jews live in Iraq even today. Jordan, Iraq, Syria, they still live there today, and it is the same problem for them living as a minority in those countries. Very difficult to openly practice their faith. So isn't there should be a international religious freedom commission set up by India, because India is the biggest example of multicultural existence, and which British thought would not happen. But can India take a lead there and set up the international religious freedom, where they can actually ensure freedom of faith to all the people, including Yazidis, including Jewish minorities, like you said rightly, that any minority should be protected.
Or even Kurds, for example, how Kurds have been left to the mercy of Turkey by USA?
Yeah, that's true. And what about Hindus in Bangladesh and
Of
Hindus
course,
in and
Hindus everywhere.
Pakistan?
Hindus everywhere.
Yeah, Hindus in Pakistan and
Wherever they
Hindus.
are, even now, if they are not persecuted physically, they are persecuted academically, if I
Correct.
may say so.
In
The way they are
USA,
abused and they are misrepresented everywhere is very serious issue. And sooner or later, I am very sure Indian government will take it up. Right now, it is tied up with so many other issues. Right now, it's trying to come out of its immediate past as well as with the COVID disaster. But as we come out of, I'm sure that India will also take it upon itself to represent all those persecuted minorities and people who don't find a voice in the international arena.
Hindus in USA also are being persecuted in a big way, where the topics of Hinduism are being taught by the Christian pastors. Now,
Yeah.
and whereas in India, Christian issues are taught only by Christians, but in USA, Hindus are taught Hinduism by the Christian pastors, regular Christian pastors. Now, and also the course
What about
material.
schools? Your academics also, if there is a webinar or seminar in universities about Islam, Islamic scholars will come. And I think earlier also talked about it. In case of Christianity, will be headed by a well-known scholar of Christianity. But in case of Hindus, those seminars will be sans the presence of any Hindu scholar, or they will be scholars of Wendy School, Wendy Doniger School, who have their own worldview based on Wendy's worldview because they want to have a good place in the academics. But the genuine Hindu scholars who come from Bharat or people who actually imbibe the Sanskrit and the scriptures of India are never there. So that is the biggest problem, that others want to represent a Hindu worldview or Buddhist worldview, but for their own, they will want their own scholars, which is right. As I always say that I would not like to represent Islam or Christianity because I don't know enough. Similarly, they have no right to have a worldview on our behalf because they have a very different worldview. The very basis of a Hindu worldview and Western worldview is totally different. They cannot even understand. When they don't believe in rebirth, they don't believe in moksha, they don't believe in respect for all religions, how can they represent Hindus? The very bases are different.
That's true, because that's a problem there, because the the logic of thinking is totally reversed, even in the
Yes,
languages also.
yes.
The so the
Very idea of Hindus worshipping nature and Abrahamic religion saying that God has created nature for you, so you go ahead and enjoy, somehow exploit it the best possible way for your pleasure. So human being is the top of the pyramid, and they have a right to exploit nature, exploit other living beings. But that is the worldview of Hindu. So naturally, there is a huge difference where they don't meet, and for them to represent this worldview naturally will be a distorted view.
That's true, because which is happening across the world, especially in the West, and especially in North America, I can say, and all my students can agree that what is happening there. Now, one of the things that I also noticed, that in South American countries, especially Brazil and Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Hindu studies have become more prominent. And also because of my last book, sorry, I'm not promoting my book, but my last view, and which Ratan Sharda ji has written also on Yudhishthir one, you have written the one of the forewords you have written. But in my last view book, which is One Arrow, One Kill, I have proved the Ramayan's existence in South America. Now that book is being translated by the government of Peru for the
Wonderful.
Peruvians. that because Udaigiri mountain mentioned in Ramayana is in Peru. So South Americans are gradually waking up that their native history is far different than what European papal bull conquerors actually told them, and it is gradually rising up.
In fact,
But
I may have told in the earlier discussion sometime that International Center for Cultural Studies, which holds an as a international seminar every 3 day seminar every 3 years, lot of people from Latin America come, scholars, and they find Hinduism to Hindu Dharma and Hindu culture much more closer to their own way of thinking, their ancient culture. And they believe that if they go along with Hindus, they can preserve their culture, they can preserve their history and culture. That is the strength of Hindu Dharma, and that is the strength of these Latin American countries who have very old civilization, wonderful civilization, and they had a good economy, good kingdoms, and their own culture and history. They have to revive that to feel that pride in their own culture rather than the colonial view that these are backward people whom they basically just destroyed. So this narrative of the people who destroy other countries' culture as superior will be stopped only when they study their own culture and they take inspiration from Hindu culture, which was there earlier. A lot of evidence is there, as you have also said rightly. There are archaeological evidences also that, see, thousands of years back when there was hardly any maritime, Indian traders were all over the world, right from 3 or 4 BC. So before the Abrahamic religions were even born, all these Indian Hindus were traveling across, because there was only Hindu at that time, of course, all over the world, left their science there, and that is how they were adopted. And I think it's a wonderful idea that ancient cultures and civilizations come together, gain their strength, and create an alternative wise to highly exclusivist way the world thinks,
you know,
or rather the scholars of the world think.
in the first book, I had claimed that India should start Dharma Commonwealth because United Nations is failing every day. It's failing India. It's become a more of a political tool for the Western community to impose their fake world.
Not anymore. Now it's dominated by Chinese funds. So it is no more. Westerns have no say there. That's what Trump
No,
did.
the Western are still
He
paying the
said, if I
money.
don't get my mileage, I will not support it. Very
Yeah,
practical approach.
I mean
See,
the
the way WHO has tried to cover up for China is obvious.
you know the silence in the American Biden administration is deafening. Is the silence is, and even the Senator Rand Paul is just like he questioned Fauci, and this is on the internet and it's breaking the internet right.
Yes.
And but anyway, keeping those things aside, coming back to this point, so do you think that India should now play a role with relationships on both sides and also a very strong military force? And I was told by somebody, one analyst, that India has a larger military force than the entire Middle East put together, including
I say
Israel.
India is next to China in terms of military might, in terms of air force, etc. It's not up to not up to China. So to claim that India is a military power would be a fallacy. It is strengthening slowly. It's strengthening very fast because there was huge gap during the 10 years of UPA rule when hardly any military purchase was done. So although we have a large land army, we are doing very quick work to complete the vacuum created by a non-procurement of very important critical components for the security forces. So to say that we can become world police would be, over ambitious. If not now, maybe 5 years down the line. But right now, I would say that to claim that we can be military police for the world would be a fallacy. And but yes, a strong India would mean a very good strength and backing to all other smaller countries who are somehow now being tried to be taken over by China through economic might, through bullying, etc. So a strong India, strong security for India is a good counter to this kind of dominance that is being now, tried by China. And America is abdicating its role, I think, and the way it might. And right now, it's not. It is making the right noises, but whether it will stand up to China or not, we will see only in coming times.
Now, one of the things is like the minorities all over the world. India has done a fantastic work
I
in
would like to see how Quad works once Biden really gets the hang. Whether the Quad would work, the
That's a
way it
different
was.
discussion altogether. We'll talk separately on
When you talk
this.
of military might, this automatically comes up.
No, I know, but the quad is whether it will be successful. We'll have a separate discussion on that. But coming back, can India set up a minority commission for the world's minorities and take a lead in that? Because India was the number one country to oppose apartheid, and which was very well respected by the world. India was the number one country in the non-aligned movement, which was like a moving off of all the blocks, Soviet bloc as well as American bloc. Now the world needs a minority protection of Hindus, first of all, Yazidis, and other communities who need protection from a large country like India. They look up to India, but there is no foreign response. And so that is a big problem. Even in America, like I have so many students now typing that can there something do in my country? Like Armenians, there's some one of the Armenian students is just not texting, and yes, these students are also there. And even Palestinian students are saying that they need help from India because many of their fathers studied in Indian universities. And
Aditya ji, irony is that you talk of human rights commissions and you talk separately of minority commission. Basically, the persecution of minority is a part of human rights commission and human rights. But human rights, the current human rights, whatever bodies are totally dominated by people who have one-eyed view of the world. So they don't look at anything which hurts the image of Islam or which hurts the image of Christianity. So this kind of one-year myopic and one-eyed view of the world that cannot work either in terms of minority persecution or in terms of human rights. So in my eye, any persecution is a human rights persecution, whether somebody is a minority of one or minority of a million, wherever they are. Now we can't really claim Hindus to be minority, except maybe in countries like America or Britain, but because it is number three in terms of following. So this Sanatan Dharma, which is in size is number three, by itself the numbers don't say we are minority, but in different parts of the world, wherever they are, if they are in minority, they are not treated well. If you remember Fiji revolt, what was the revolt? That people of Indian origin, primarily Hindus, were able to get power through democratic means, and there was a rebellion, and the government was put down. So this basically what we talk about, honest, objective, fight for human rights that will include all these minorities, big or small, and that is required. This lopsided view of human rights, which only talks when it suits them and their worldview, that has to go, and a fresh new perspective has to come up. For that, India is the ideal candidate, I would say,
no, you're right. And
because
what I
it
meant,
protected all the minorities despite all the noises made by so-called seculars about minorities not being safe in India. It is they wherever they're strong, they bully Hindus. For example, if you have read the latest news, 3 days back, Tamil Nadu High Court had to reject the plea of Muslims of a Hindu religious festival, which was happening for hundreds of years, and they have been harassed for a few years. So both of them went to courts, and it took some time for court to decide that when a minority becomes a majority, it has no right to stop the traditional festivities of the other community, which in this case was Hindus. So within India also, where we are supposed to be dominating majority, your life depends on which area of India you live and whether you are majority or minority. We have seen that in Bengal, we have seen that in Assam, and we are now seeing it in Tamil Nadu. I gave you the latest example. So that is why I say we need a very objective worldview with a clear-cut definition of what is violation of human rights, rather than living on rhetorics and talking in terms of some new left ideas.
no, you're right. The human rights, the entire human rights definition has been hijacked, and they mostly the non-Islamic or non-Abrahamic faiths are not even considered as humans. So the rights,
Yes.
human rights of non-Abrahamic faith people are missing, and that's why the United Nations Human Rights Commission is completely irrelevant today. Now, and that's where the countries like
See, for example, your so-called religious rights forum of USA, US HRC, what kind of
CIRF.
report? What kind of report they make? Just because we now India feel that forced convergence or convergence to lure and deception are not the right thing, and those agencies who get money in the terms of serving the people are used for converting people, if they are questioned, You have Human Rights Commission of USA trying to prohibit India because that is dominated by Christians. So this Christian agency in the name of human rights, in the name of so-called body which looks after the rights, are basically looking at the rights of Muslims. Sorry, Christians. So this game of using objective terms for playing partisan politics of religion has to be exposed.
Both democracy and the American program of sending democracy all over the world and human rights, both are a ploy for negotiating a better deal by the Americans. It's very clear, and also by the Europeans. Also, we all know that. But the point is that there is no proper answer, like by the other countries. The when it comes to human rights of Hindus or the other religious
Because
minorities.
people from our side have not confronted these people. We are apologists, we protest, we don't confront with facts. So unless these governments, including our own, and the think tanks which are hardly effective in India, and some powerful bodies speak out openly with facts and figures, this kind of myth will be continuously circulated by the Western world and the Islamic world. Because basically Hindus don't play victim card and don't even think we should play victim card. We should place the facts on the table and let God decide. And that equal opportunity to speak up is what is missing in US Academy even now.
USCRF, as you said, is a defunct body, is funded by the US State Department, is an official body of the American government, and we are all appalled by it. We want to work on it, and there is a right way to do it. We need to get our commissioners appointed. I was nominated one of the times, but I was not selected because I'm a
How
Hindu.
many Western world have covered the atrocities on minorities, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, etc., or even within uh, Buddhists, etc., in Bangladesh or Pakistan or Afghan? None of them speaks. None of them speaks of Pashtuns or Balochis, the way they are killed, or Sindhis. None of them speaks about them. So where is the human right? Where are the minorities? Pakistan is biggest conglomeration of Punjab-dominated minorities. So Punjabi people could dominate the entire narrative. They dominate the economy. They dominate the military, and all other groups are basically minorities stuck into Pakistan. But nobody speaks about them.
No, the actually the world will never speak about Hindu minorities because it's again the Abrahamic concept of preaching their own religion above others. Like in the case of Israel, it was the Christians and Muslims combined opposed the creation of Israel. Both of them opposed in that area. So there will be never be a time where they will propose us or they will allow us. We have to take that position on our own, like you
Yes.
rightly said. We should
Take it.
negotiate and take it on our own. And behind everybody except Hindus and Buddhists, there are governments working. Even for Buddhists, there are governments. Thailand, Thai government and other governments, they protect their communities. Even Burmese government protect their communities for good reasons or bad reasons. But only in the case of India, the government doesn't speak, and which has the largest. I mean, it is the only country of Hindus. There is no other country. And Israel was created just to create a home for the Jews. There was no other home for the Jews. So somewhere India has to take a step forward.
It reminds me actually, the only other community that I can think of, there will be more, I'm very sure there will be many more, the way they have been ejected from the lands, whether they may be in African countries, even maybe in Arabian nations. But if you look at Sindhis, the Hindu Sindhis, Hindus from Sindh, they have been totally uprooted from the land just like Jews were from their land. They have a comparison. No other comparison works. So if anybody has any heart, they should start comparing Hindus from Sindh who were totally uprooted from their lands and who have scattered all over India and also other parts of the world to make a living. If they have it a success of themselves, it's a different thing. But they are the people who, just like Jews, have been thrown all over the world, basically in India, but every other smallest island you find Sindhis because they were uprooted and thrown from the land. That is the closest you can come to actually Jewish persecution or Israel. If you really want to compare Palestinians and Kashmiri, that is the wrong comparison. Then compare
There is not even
Hindus,
mention.
Hindus of Sindh to the Israelis or Jews.
They are not even mentioned, and in fact Sindhis have also accepted. See, the thing is, the world lives on the duck which quacks the loudest gets the cracker. That's the philosophy of the world. And we have to start quacking more and more. Many of the students are laughing.
I would say that we need to actually believe that we are lions. So there is a saying in Sanskrit, Swayameva Mridita. A lion doesn't, declare that he's a king. People assume, but because of strength, he's the king. So we have to assert that we are the kings, we are the strong community, we are strong. Rather than quaking, we have to roar.
But we have assumed we are Sone ki chidiya.
We
So
were, we will become again. What's wrong with that? You must have a session. You already, I'm very sure you had sessions on the wealth that India created for the world for itself till 1850. So there is no fallacy in that.
actually, I will.
That's why I say we need to roar loud and that we are the strong community and we will stand up again. And we will not be fooled by, believing that because we live with foxes and hyenas, we are foxes or hyenas. We are lion and that is what our strength. We will not bleed. We will not quack. We will not do that.
So we should call her Sone ka Sher. We were Sone ka Sher one time, because Sone ki chidiya is a Persian proverb which was used to motivate the Persian attackers to India. I would say Irani attackers to India, to actually tell them that they can even easily be subdued. So they're Sone ki chidiya. So they did not, but the chidiya.
And narrative of last so many years in 70 years of India has been that you are not a lion,
Correct.
you are a lamb.
Right.
So India
It is
is a
actually, you're a
poor
small
lamb.
bird.
Yeah, so they have tried to make us forget our past, forget our strengths, and only we are shown only the weaknesses that we incurred due to thousands or 800 years of slavery. Even during that time, we continuously fought. So that history has to come out. Then we start believing that okay, we were never subjugated the way other countries simply lost their culture and their lands, the way entire Arabian Peninsula or Africa or Europe lost their culture, their lands to two different kind of aggressive religions. We didn't allow that to happen. We fought, and that is a strength. Unless we come to realize that, and then also own up the errors that are steeped into us, we will not be able to prove our greatness. And that is what we need to do rather than bleed.
Yes. Thank you, Ratanji, for this explosive discussion, and I think very educative for many people. And for viewers who do go to the YouTube and subscribe and comment on it. And we'll
Thank you
take.
so much, Aditya ji. Thanks.
Namaste. Thank you.